And welcome to today's news analysis. We are doing the Indian Express Papers Chandigarh edition. Now you can see the topics that we are covering. So drugs in Kashmir, the lander separation from Chandrayaan 3, free power and subsidy. Recent report of Public Accounts Committee was released that subsidy for big farmers should not be there. INS Vindhyagiri and Project 17A, arguments regarding Article 370 in the Supreme Court, editorial and opinion section where we'll be covering Indian Penal Code, a very harsh critique on Digital Data Protection Bill, and implementation of Forest Rights Act in Jammu and Kashmir. Besides, we see thaw in relations between Iran and Saudi Arabia. Thaw means normalization of relations or unfreezing of relations. From the economy section, we have an RBI note which says that inflation is going to go past 6%. Then we have an article concerning the rise in bond yields and T-bills. So T-bills also are bonds, so their yields are also increasing. So what are the implications? Different types of T-bills, so that we will see for prelims. Besides this, there is another article concerning capital expenditure. So it has gone 60% of the target. So spending has already been done. And there is a very interesting term, infrastructure or capex-led economic recovery. We had a question in mains on similar lines, how investment in infrastructure can lead to economic recovery. So means 2021 or 2022. Okay, so these are the topics. Now coming to the main body of this newspaper. So you can see the first one is about Jammu and Kashmir. It is saying that more and more of addicts are coming to Srinagar OPD. So every 12 minutes, one person is coming. So indicating more people into drugs. Record heroin seizures, arrests at a high, and young men are pouring into clinics. Okay, so situation is bad. Now, let us look at the issue of drugs in totality, how UPSC can ask us questions. So one is, what needs to be done to address the issue of drugs? The need for a policy, a specific policy for drugs. So this can be asked in your GS2 because it has an element of governance. Okay. Now, when we say about the need for a policy or what is the government doing, that also we can add. So the government's focus has been on managing the supply of the drugs, supply side of things. For example, the NDPS Act, narcotics, drugs, psychotropic substances. Okay, so heroin seizures, arrest on those grounds, all that. Less emphasis has been given on demand side of things. Demand side means creating awareness, creating jobs so that people do not fall into the trap of drugs. So all those things. So it has to be a cumulative thing. Supply side points as well as demand side do give this point. Okay. Now drug trafficking has been asked, linking it with national security in your GS3 paper. We didn't have a total question on drug trafficking. It was actually linking drug trafficking with arms trafficking and money laundering. So yeah, so GS3, we can be asked if it is from national security point of view. Now, what is the effect of drugs on the youth in particular, right? So drugs and society. So that is GS1. So drug menace, bigger threat than militancy, says the DGP of Jammu and Kashmir, Union Territory of J&K. Now, very quickly, behind the valley's drug crisis, one, of course, it is a border state. It has more access to drugs. But besides this, the issue is also the youth. The more and more of youth is going into drugs. And that may be because of fewer jobs. In fact, the state of Jammu and Kashmir, Union Territory, is witnessing a demographic dividend. More and more of youthful population is there. But lesser jobs are there, lesser avenues of a good life. So it is more likely that they will fall into the trap of drugs. Plus, a lot of crisis has been seen by the state, so that may also be pushing them into drugs. Okay. So nobody is really going to ask you what drugs are being used and all those things. So that was covered. I'm not telling you. You want to read, you can read. Next is Chandrayaan 3. Obviously, this is the space probe that is marching towards moon. It is already in the moon's orbit. And the idea of Chandrayaan 3 is to release a lander, lander or land robo on the surface of the moon, specifically the South Pole. The lander is named Vikram and it will land 69 degrees south. That's the exact coordinates. At the same time, by the way, this is August 23, the expected date. At the same time, we have a Russian space probe and they'll be landing their lander known as Luna 25. This will be 72 degrees south and this will be August 21st, tentative. Now, in this context, I have shared with you this PDF on the Telegram channel, right? So you should know the basic details. So this rocket is known as LVM, Medium Launch Vehicle, LVM, right? So it's neither written as GSLV or PSLV, it is written as LVM, but it is based on cryogenic technology. Okay. I want you to focus on the lander payloads. So what all things are there that you should know. Now, going by the previous type of questions that UPSC has asked. So now we can expect a question on the mechanism or the functioning of Chandrayaan 3, the activities that are going to take place. You should be prepared to write a short note on the same, 150 words. Previously, a question has been asked on IRNSS. All UPSC coaching, etc., were telling us about the applications of regional navigation. But the question was about the mechanism and the functioning of the overall IRNSS or regional navigation architecture. So I think you should write a note on this. I would strongly advise you. You have the PDF, it is very easy to do it now. Okay, a very controversial article was given by Bibek Debroy, in which he suggested the need for a new constitution. By the way, Bibek Debroy is the chairman of Economic Advisory Council, EAC, to the Prime Minister. So EAC Council has said that these views are not shared by this council to the Prime Minister. Now, what did he say? We should know. He's saying that we need a new constitution. The lifespan of most of the constitution is 17 years. So we should now have our own, we should update a constitution which was written in 1950s. Coming back to the realities, the new age realities. Further, there is a strong critique of the Supreme Court, where the Supreme Court has, in the 1973 judgment, Keshav Nanda Bharti case, it established the doctrine of basic structure. That is, Parliament cannot amend all sections of the Constitution. There are certain elements, certain basic things of the Constitution which cannot be changed. So that was doctrine of basic structure. That was created by, that was an invention of the Supreme Court or innovation. Okay, so this was the statement. Now from mains, we can say from GS2, if UPSC is innovative, they may ask you that, there is a theme that constitution is a living document. So we may say, okay, fine, lifespan of a constitution is 17 years, but a constitution is having a right blend of rigidity and flexibility. So it has actually been updated from time to time with a lot of amendments going on and a lot of judicial innovations also. So do we really need to amend the constitution? Yes or no? Obviously, your answer will not be about yes or no. It has to be a balanced approach. With ending with the line, it's a living document. Because you cannot afford to say this when you're appearing for this exam. Okay. Landslides in hill states, NDMA report, National Disaster Management Authority. It is a statutory body. That is, it is created via a statute or a law of the Parliament. It has reported flagged poor planning, poor urbanization, lax laws. Laws are there, but the government was not implementing it. Tourism pressure, economic interests, the Himalayas have gone past their carrying capacity. I hope you have heard about this word, carrying capacity of the Himalayas. So it has gone well beyond it, and therefore the crisis. Besides this, obviously we can, the reasons for the landslide, what mitigation measures have to be taken. So those you can, obviously you have to prepare. I keep mentioning this. I keep mentioning the PDF of from the NDMA website. National Landslide Risk Mitigation Strategy. So all those things I've already shared. Okay. So in this page, we have two articles. So one is on Madanlal Dhingra, and the other one is about this farm issue. Yeah. So the Public Accounts Committee for the state of Punjab legislature, recommended withdrawal of free power for big farmers. Now, by the way, the issue of agriculture is under the state list, which is in Schedule 7. So it is obviously the domain of the states. Okay. So Public Accounts Committee had earlier recommended the following. Amongst one point is only mentioned. So it recommended that all electrical connections should be metered. So it should be metered, and subsidy for big farmers should be taken away. By the way, from electricity, most of the time farmers use it to pump, use it to run their tube wells, and the tube wells keep running. And these tube wells are used mainly for flooding of fields for paddy cultivation. So in an arid area, you are cultivating paddy by flooding. So it is not good. It is affecting the water table, right? So overall, it is affecting the health of the aquifers. We can put it that way. Okay. So no subsidy for big farmers, but small and marginal farmers may be given the subsidy. Okay, so that was the one of the steps that they said. So metered connection and no subsidy for big farmers. Next point was that there should be no tube wells near canal. So if your farm is near the canal where the water is flowing, so obviously this water can be diverted into the fields. Why do you need a tube well? So tube well should not be required. So it should be closed. Okay. Now this is a very, very controversial statement, politically speaking. So PSC had taken back its report. At the same time, the chief minister also says that free farm power will continue and cannot discriminate between big and small farmers. Okay, I know it's not right. Okay. Now over here, we have the issue at hand, that is power subsidy. Power subsidy is affecting the health of the state electricity boards, which we know them as DISCOMs. Power is getting lost over here. Besides, we hear the issue of groundwater depletion. The health of the aquifers are getting affected. Then we can also say that more of the subsidies are cornered by the big farmers who are well off, who are affluent, as compared to small and marginal farmers. Now over here, if you look at pan-India level, 86.1%, according to the agricultural census 2015-16, 86.1% of Indian farmers are small and marginal farmers. Okay, you can just remember this note over here, while the rest is obviously medium and big farmers. So these are the people who should get subsidy, while people with big land holdings should not be getting, but they do get more and more of the subsidy because they have more land under its control. So you can see over here, a fact was mentioned that small and big farmers, who constitutes about 3.62 lakh in population terms, they are getting 50 small and big, medium and big. They are getting 56% of the subsidy, while small and marginal, who are much more in number, who are double in population, they are getting only 44% of the subsidy. Okay, so you can see the more and more subsidy are going to the big farmers who actually do not need it. And yes, next now. When we talk about water, declining of the water table, and obviously water is getting diverted to agriculture, which could have been used elsewhere also. So fifth of the water, or 80% of the water demand in a country is going towards farms. So if we rationalize farming practices, we can save and conserve water, which is very much required. And one more thing about the flooding of fields is that with flooding, the salts in the water are also there. With eventually, with let's say with evaporation from the sun, the salts remain, the water goes away. So it makes the salt more saline or alkaline, which is not good for farming. Now, moving on, coming to the schemes of the central government. With reference to subsidy, power is being used for running of the tube wells. Obviously, a lot of water, electricity is getting wasted in that regard. So for that, there is a scheme known as PM Kusum. Under this scheme, solar powered water pumps are given, solar powered tube wells are given, and they are connected to a SIM which intimates the farmers about how much water has been filled. All those data is provided. So PM Kusum, Ministry of Power. Then we have another scheme known as Deen Dayal Upadhyay Gram Jyoti Yojana. This is concerning separation of feeder. So the health of the distribution companies is not good, financial health. And on top of it, most of the electricity, much of the electricity goes via the farms. So they don't get many remuneration of this, the distribution companies. So they are reeling under losses. So there is a scheme, there was a proposal that the electricity that is being supplied to rural and urban areas. So for rural and urban areas, there should be separate feeders so that we know how much electricity is going towards rural side of things. And based on that, the distribution companies can be compensated by the government. So for that, the scheme is Deen Dayal Upadhyay Gram Jyoti Yojana. Then, to have farmers incorporate sustainable practices, there are farmer extension services. So these come under Krishi Vigyan Kendra. So one of the schemes is Krishi Vigyan Kendra. And the main scheme is Rashtriya Krishi Vikas Yojana, under which farmer extension services like Krishi Vigyan Kendra are there. A small obituary on Madan Lal Dhingra. So I've mentioned it, 114th death anniversary of Madan Lal Dhingra. He killed Curzon Wiley, right, a British officer. He killed. For that, he was hanged at the young age of 24. Now, more about Madan Lal Dhingra. Madan Lal Dhingra belonged to a very influential family who were British loyalists. However, he was inclined towards the freedom movement. Madan Lal Dhingra was sent to UK to study mechanical engineering. There he came in contact with Veer Savarkar and Shyamji Krishna Verma. Now here, Veer Savarkar had already created an organization known as Abhinav Bharat Mandal, of which Madan Lal Dhingra was a member. At the same time, Shyamji Krishna Verma had formed India House in London. Madan Lal Dhingra was member of both. So here, the conspiracy to kill Curzon Wiley was hatched. Okay, next news. Indigenized spares keep Russian origin IF chopper, Mi helicopters, MI, and other transport fleet AN-32 flying. Okay, so this we get from Air Force's Base Repair Depot's Air Commodore, Brigadier ranked officer. Okay, now with the Ukraine war, basically the supply has been affected, supply of spares. Mi helicopter as well as AN-32 and many other military equipments are of Russian origin. So if the war is, because of the war, the spares are not coming. So Indian, we are making the spares ourselves and using it. So our dependence on Russia is coming down. That is the important point. Sad state of affairs, right, in Himachal Pradesh. Even sadder, they have put, all that construction activities that are going on. So the geologists, the people who study the earth, the rocks, the stones, so they have a problem with all that construction activities, particularly the expansion of the heritage Shimla-Kalka railway track. So what they're basically saying is that all the unprecedented construction plus the landslides that have taken place, it has caused irreparable damage to the geological evidences. The Himalayas, as we know, much of it was from the seabed of the Tethys Sea, right? Indian plate joining the Eurasian plate and the Himalayas coming up. So the in-between region was the Tethys Sea. So here there was a direct evidence of this region being part of the marine seabed. From marine seabed, it has moved to the freshwater seabed. So this has been affected. So, and this was more so in this region over here. So irreparable damage has been done to this important evidence. Yes, INS Vindhyagiri was launched by the president. It is Indian Navy's stealth frigate, right? So stealth means something that cannot be easily detected. Now it seems at odds with the fact that this is a 149 meter odd big ship. 149 meter is obviously big ship. 100-meter race, you can imagine how big that track is. So 50 meters more. Okay, anyways, so it still means it is hard to detect by the enemies. Now, INS Vindhyagiri is part of Project 17A, in which there are 6 naval vessels or 6 ships, the latest being Vindhyagiri. It is a stealth frigate. Other frigates are INS Nilgiri, Udyagiri, Himgiri, Taragiri, and Dunagiri. All named after ships. Giri again, mountains. Now I would suggest all these names, you can take a screenshot and spot them on the atlas. Okay, so this is it from Project 17A and Vindhyagiri. Just an update actually. All this malpractices that are going on where we get bulk SMSs and spam calls and wrongful calls to take out money from us. So government is looking into it. It is saying that SIM dealers cannot, have to be registered by the telecom companies like Jio, Airtel, etc. They have to be registered. There cannot be bulk sales of SIM cards, so that cannot be done, which obviously it helps in mass spamming of people. So, and if wrongful conduct is coming out from that particular SIM, the license of the SIM dealer will be cancelled. Okay, coming to Article 370. So now with reference to Article 370, obviously the question is it temporary, it is permanent? Can the president cancel or make this Article 370 inoperative? So this is being discussed. Now the basic argument has been that Article 373 cannot be, even though it is temporary, transient, transitional, but it has acquired a permanent character, right? It has a permanent character because if you read Article 373, this point over here, the recommendation of the Constituent Assembly is required for this article to be ceased to be operative, or major modifications to be done to nullify this Article 370. And then President can issue such a notification. So Constituent Assembly of the state has to give a recommendation to the President. But Constituent Assembly of Jammu and Kashmir never came into being, so it became permanent in character. Okay. So now that is being argued that already, if you call it Article 370 permanent, but so many changes have been brought into Article 370. 370 provided for arrangement of administration between, the link between Jammu and Kashmir and New Delhi. So so many changes have been created over the last 60, 70 years that changes have taken place. So those were simply by a presidential order, and then the state legislature makes makes laws on that. So the more or less Indian Constitution and Jammu and Kashmir were on same lines, barring some exceptions. So they are saying that it is permanent, but changes have been made to Article 370 on presidential orders. So here, if we read Article 372, I've cut short. So change to constitution is there with concurrence of the state legislative assembly. So presidential order or any law parliament has made, or president may say that these things will not be there or these things have to be there. So the state legislatures concurrence is required. But when it comes to termination or making it inoperative, then in that case, Constituent Assembly of the State Legislative Assembly a Constituent Assembly of Jammu and Kashmir could do it. Coming to the editorial page, very quickly, standing on the ground, this is about the recent failure of the talks between India and China. Right, so both sides are not willing to concede grounds to each other, so we are having this standoff. Coming to the next article, missed opportunity. This is a strong critique of the government, which recently brought in amendments to the Indian Penal Code, recently done in the Parliament. Now, talking about the Indian Penal Code, it's obviously for criminal punishments. Penal means punishment. Okay. So this was brought in by the British in 1860s, during the time of Macaulay. And obviously it has a colonial legacy and it has to be updated. In fact, the person who introduced it, Macaulay, he himself said that there has to be regular updations and revisions to it. Come to 1970s, we had the 42nd Law Commission. It also provided for revision and updation of the Indian Penal Code, but it could never come up because of the dissolution of the Lok Sabha. So we're talking about 70s. Okay. Now this has been updated, and over here, the idea of updating the Indian Penal Code is to rationalize the laws. There are certain laws, particularly where there are issues about definition, for example, definition of sedition, which led to arrest of so many people. So definitions have to be there. It should be precise as well as comprehensible. The idea is that the law should be easy to interpret, right? Easy to interpret. It should be specific so that the judiciary and the police or the criminal justice mechanism functions properly. There is better conviction rate. There is less discrepancy, all those things. So some terms have been changed, but the controversial ones still remain, like sedition, etc. Those are still there. So some improvement is there. For example, with sedition, it says that if there is armed rebellion, that then it should be sedition. While there was a term known as disaffection towards the government, that has been removed, but has added a new term known as subversive activities. Now, what is subversive activities? That we don't know. So it is still vague. Then the issue of death penalty. Most of the countries are doing away with democracies. We have still decided to retain it. Likewise, rape. Rape is not yet gender neutral. It has to be done that way. Further, marital rape could have been added as a punishment. So much was talked about marital rape. So marital rape should be criminalized. So that this hasn't taken place. We have retained criminal defamation. We have retained the offense of blasphemy. So all those things are there. And also no changes have been made to hate speech. A lot of people, a lot of things associated with hate speech are there. So though that is not changed. So 153A of the IPC. So this news is again a kind of an update more than anything else. Coming to the Forest Rights Act, here we're talking about Forest Rights Act with reference to Jammu and Kashmir, the UT. Now, Forest Rights Act came into being in 2006. It was created by a law of the Parliament, of course, Act, implemented in 2008. It's, as the name goes, forest rights. It was about the rights of the tribals to their lands and minor forest produce. So the traditional rights of the tribals to that patch of land. And any decision has to be taken, that has to be done via the Gram Sabha collectively. For example, some developmental project or whatever. So Gram Sabha was to decide, or its recommendation was required. So it provided for rights of the tribals in that area, community rights. Now, when we talk about tribals, one important thing, like we people live in urban areas, villages, we have this proper documentation that this land belongs to us, this house belongs to us. But tribals, obviously, this was not feasible. So therefore, this law was introduced. Now, why are we talking about it now? We're talking in context of Jammu and Kashmir. So this law was not in place because of Article 370. Article 370 goes in 2019. This law comes into being on September 2021. Here it is mentioned, implemented in September 2021. Now, here number of tribal population is there. 12% of UT is a tribal population. Of this, main tribes are Gujjars, Bakerwals, Ghadi, Sipi, Darshin, who engage in the activity of transhumance. Right, so these tribes are there. I have mentioned them because for prelims you may be asked questions, right? Match the following tribes, etc. So that way. Transhumance basically means animal husbandry, moving animals from one patch to another where the greens are there. Okay, so September 21, Forest Rights Act was to be implemented. Now here, when we start the implementation, the care must be taken, what the author is basically saying, care must be taken to improve the capacity of local self-government and Gram Sabhas. So these are not very well organized. We have to improve this. Otherwise, this act will be redundant or meaningless. Because at the core of the Forest Right Act is the functioning of the Gram Sabhas. If the Gram Sabhas do not function, the Forest Rights Act is meaningless. Okay, flawed law, putative process, digital personal data protection bill is being criticized by one of the members from opposition. So very wrongful conducts have been mentioned actually in committee has not given time and its own members are not discussed. All those things are mentioned. Obviously, UPSC will not go into that much of critique. Overall, we should know the basics of the digital data protection law, its features, shortcomings, concerns. So that for this, I think this PRS is sufficient. Otherwise, we keep going through the criticisms. So central government is exempt. Central government has free hand in appointment of the Digital Data Protection Authority, dilution of the RTI, and censorship of the internet. So this is also provided in Digital Data Protection Law. Now coming to this international section, we see normalization of relations between Iran and Saudi Arabia. Iran sends its foreign ministers to Riyadh, which is the capital of Saudi Arabia and one of the biggest cities of Iran. Now, obviously I told you, but why did the relations go bad? That was what I was thinking. In 2016, Saudi Arabia, which is a Sunni country, and Iran, which is a Shia country. So in 2016, the Saudi majority, Saudi Arabia, Sunni majority, they executed a prominent Shiite cleric. As a result of this, there was protest in Iran. So protesters in Iran invaded Saudi diplomatic posts because Saudi had done it. And when they did it, so they decided to move out of Iran. All the diplomatic relations will be ended and they move back to Saudi Arabia. So now the relations seem to be normalizing. And one more thing, after this happened, the Iran nuclear deal, the deal comprising of the P5 members plus Germany, P5 plus 1. So this deal came off. China welcomes visit by US Commerce Secretary after investment curbs. Okay. Joe Biden's administration decided, they made a law that money that will come, investments going to China will be highly regulated, especially into the high-tech sectors like computer chips, micro electronics, etc. Now, obviously, we know that US and China are competing. So that's why this thing has come up. Now, in this regard, the US Commerce Secretary is visiting. So therefore, they may try to influence her and maybe the relations may get normalized. A pig kidney works in a donated human body for over a month. Very good achievement. Okay. So this is known as xenotransplantation, where an animal organ or an organ is harvested in an animal is put into the human body. So we have the issue of or inavailability of organs, etc. So animal organs may be harvested. So this has been done and this organ survived for over a month. Now you may think this person would have died, but actually this experiment was done on a brain dead person. So that person was already brain dead, but the body was still functioning. So they put this kidney and that body worked for a month, which is good. Previously, this attempt failed because of immune system attacks. Now talking about xenotransplantation, obviously this is important from GS3 point of view, right? GS3, science and tech is in GS3. Besides the ethics of xenotransplantation, GS4. So that can also be asked. Coming to the economy section, headline inflation to remain well above 6% in Q2, says RBI's article. Fine. Don't get bothered by this term headline inflation. Headline inflation is normal inflation. It comprises of all, the basket of goods and services, so that if we remove the volatile items like food, fuel, etc., then we get core inflation. So normal inflation is headline inflation. Okay, so it will remain up 6%. Now here we must know that inflation target is 4%. According to the RBI Monetary Policy Committee, 4%, with the tolerance limit of plus minus 2%, that is 6% or 2%. So it is already well above 6%. This is not a good sign, and RBI must increase the interest rates, which it is not doing. Okay. Further, they are saying the risk of stagflation risk remains low at this juncture. Now, what is stagflation? Stagflation is high inflation plus high unemployment rates. Let's see. And now stagflation I have seen in a lot of papers, prelims type MCQ paper, question is asked. Next is bond T-bills. T-bill is treasury bills. So yields see sharp rise as inflation spikes, liquidity tightens. Now just one thing I want to tell you, bonds or T-bills, whatever, the bonds have something known as coupon rate. It's like the interest that you get on that bond, right? Like FD, deposit, whatever, right? So one is coupon rate. So yield is more than coupon rate actually. So suppose one buys a bond and sells it at a future date, that return, that is also part of the yield. So yield is more than the coupon rate. More or less, depends. But yes, it's conceptually speaking, it's more than coupon rate. So the bond yields are high, bonds and T-bills. So if the bonds yields are high, that means more money is likely to go to bonds because more returns are coming from the bonds. That would mean that banks will not get adequate money because people are more keen to, or institutional investors are more keen to put money in bonds. Now banks also need money. So what will bank do is to attract investments, they will increase the interest rates or deposit rates. Yesterday only we discussed that the banks are considering increasing deposit rates by 20, 25, 30 basis points, or they will issue a certificate of deposits, which is of tenure of 1 year. So here it is mentioned also, a rise in bond yields indicate that there is upward pressure on interest rates. Now let us look at this this thing, T-bills. T-bills. The tenure of T-bills is important. Yes. So the tenure of T-bills mature at the period of 14 days. 14 days, 91 days, 182 days, and 364 days. The important thing is it is less than 1 year. So there are 4 types of T-bills which have tenure of 14, 91, 81, 82, and 364 days. Just wanted to tell you this. This seems to be important for prelims. Moving on, next article, capex spend, that is spending on capital expenditure, same thing, to hit 60% by September. Now 60% of what? 60% of rupees 10 trillion. 60% of 10 trillion rupees, not dollars. So 10 trillion. So we have already achieved 60% of that spending. Obviously going to the infra sector like railways, shipping, etc. So yeah. Now here there is a mention of this term by the finance secretary himself, where he says it is in line with the approach of the government towards investment-led economic recovery. So investment is in infrastructure. Government is spending more money on infrastructure. So with that, infra created or money is being spent for infra, private sector will get money for the projects to be delivered. So yeah, so more private sector will give more jobs, plus more infra created, so more capacity for the economy to grow. That will lead to economic recovery. So this is good approach, especially in a case when private sector is not doing well, which was the case actually. So to boost economic activities, this approach is being followed, especially in India's case where we are wanting in infrastructure. So it's a win-win situation. So this is it from today's newspaper, some of the sports news, right? So we have this Grand Prix Badminton League, which is going on, which auctions are to take place. A chess event is going to come up. World Championships in athletics is going to take place. So this is it. Thank you for streaming to our channel IASPrimers with me, Shubhashish.